Let's talk about that second word in the title, cultic, right?
Cultic.
Because the average listener, they hear cultic, immediately they're like,
David appoints prophetic musicians into the temple.
It's a really good way for God to keep us in check with our mind and our heart.
All these images of people holding each other by the wrist in a circle, and the early Christians had, she calls them Christian prayer circles, and she talks about how this came out of the ancient tradition.
We are definitely on a dirt road here.
Yes.
we're on a dirt road, but there are people that believe that the pyramids were built through using sound, and there was vibration, and they were able to pick up.
Which,
and
if
move
so,
the
it was
blocks.
probably their cultic prophets who were out there singing and moving the rocks. A modern version of this will say, didn't you know I would be about my father's business, right? But there is a better translation. There is a better, you have all been lied to. Here's why.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Stick of Joseph. On today's edition of Out of the Best Books with Mike and Dave, we are talking about a book called The Cultic Prophet in Ancient Israel. And it's a good conversation. What you're going to notice is it's not me and Jackson who are on the other side of Mike and Dave, but it's actually me and Brad Whitbeck from Ward Radio, who looks like is going to be a common guest here on The Stick of Joseph.
Not totally convinced it's not just a straight up move to remove me from the channel, but we'll see in future videos. No,
Whatever. He's
We're
in
trying to
one with
make
you.
the Stick of Joseph far bigger than just the Paul brothers. And so one of the things that we want to make you aware of is that if you join our Discord, then Mike and Dave, they're posting the books that they're going to be talking about in next month's episode. And so you can follow along and kind of participate more in the discussion, and it might be a little bit more fruitful. So the link to our Discord is in the description.
And Dave and Mike are members of that Discord. Now, it's not like they can live on there and just comment all the time on everything, but there is going to be discourse about the episodes that we record. So we want to build a community around this kind of book club that we're starting. So this episode, we had a lot of interesting conversations. I learned so many things that I did not know about ancient Israel and the temple. And so you're going to want to stick around till the end. Now, if you love what David Butler has to share, and also Mike Day, here is a book by Dave Butler called In the Language of Adam that we have published, and it has 10 hours of bonus footage that you can access by scanning the QR codes. And that has both Mike and Dave talking about the subject in this book. So you can get that link in the description.
And if you want to support the channel and get some cool faith-promoting merch, go to witnessapparel.com in the description, because it is impossible to fly to England for free to interview Margaret Barker. So if you want to support the channel, go to witnessapparel.com. Without further ado,
Get to the interview.
Ready? Okay. Welcome to Welcome to Stick of Joseph. I'm Mike. This is Dave. We got Brad. We got Hayden up in here. And today we're going to talk about Out of the Best Books with Mike and Dave, or with Dave and Mike. And I'm really excited to talk about this book. I know the title is a little bit nerdy.
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah,
What's
it's
the
called
title?
The Cultic Prophet and Israel's Psalmody. I know, not exactly a title that normal people. I know. It's
We
not
need
like
at
Harry
least
Potter.
definitions
Also-
of two of those words.
Yeah. Also, the book does not look like a beach romance, so it may put off some
Yeah.
purchasers.
And this one's a little bit thicker than some of the other ones we've done. Like
Yeah.
we did John Walton, which was more like a pamphlet. This is more like a legit
This
book.
is like level 10 nerd.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I got to tell you really quick, even before we get into it, the reason why I've even heard of Aubrey Johnson, really for me, was years ago. I read this book, Who Shall Ascend to the Hill of the Lord? And maybe one day we'll do a book review of this, but this is written by a couple Latter-day Saints. We have LeGrand Baker and Stephen Ricks. LeGrand Baker is a hero of mine. I've never met him. Recently, he passed away, and I absolutely love everything he does. And I don't know if it was his idea. I think it was, but he made this book available for free. You can get this in PDF form legally for free on the interweb. It's on my website called talkingscripture.org, but it's on other websites as well, and it is legally obtainable to get for free. And it was a really excellent book. It's also not a pamphlet.
No.
Okay. But I remember reading Baker and Ricks, and I thought, I've got to dig into Aubrey Johnson's scholarship. So this is one of his books, and he's written several. And when Dave and I talked about this, I'm just gonna expose myself and embarrass myself. When Dave and I talked about this book, I said we should really do Aubrey Johnson's Cultic Prophet. He's like, yeah, let's do it. And then he made a video where he said, hey, this is the book that we're gonna do. And I looked at the video and I'm like, that's not the book I was thinking of, because there's another book called The Cultic Prophet, which is like 90 pages shorter. And I was like, bro, I wanted to read that one, not this one. But anyway, I did read it. But thanks a lot, Dave, for making me work.
Hey, so
I read both. I'd never read the short one, so I went and read that one and then reread this guy.
well, that's good. Before we get into like the thesis of the book, let's talk about that second word in the title, cultic, right?
Cultic.
Because the average listener, they hear cultic, immediately they're like,
Oh, we're
fun."
talking about Joseph Smith now.
Yeah, I know we're talking. Yeah,
Cultic
Wow.
means it just means actually what it means here is in the temple. So let me start. I'm gonna read. So it's actually, this is good. The shorter book came first. And in the shorter book, he talks about, well, who are these cultic prophets? Here he doesn't address it. So if you start this book, you can infer who he's talking about, but it's really only about 2/3 of the way through that he talks about it. But let's start with that point, okay? So in 1 Chronicles 25,
Which is, everybody reads Chronicles.
everybody
right, Dave?
reads Chronicles, right? We totally read out of the Ezra-Nehemiah complex in our Old Testament year, and you'll recall fondly your discussion of
don't
1
we actually
Chronicles
skip?
25.
Don't we actually skip Chronicles?
Yeah, we
I
skip
don't-
it.
I don't think we
Really?
We
usually
skip
read
it because we
Chronicles.
do Kings, and then especially when I teaching young people, how come we're not reading that? Oh, it's just King. So whatever. We're just gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Kings
Except-
sounds cooler than Chronicles, like
Yeah.
objectively. I think
Yeah.
that's probably
So
the majority of
Chronicles
it.
This is
25,
why
you
we
said?
are, 1 Chronicles 25. This is why we are slaves to the Deuteronomist, just because we read his books.
Oh no.
So, 1 Chronicles 25. So
That's a T-shirt.
I'm going to say,
Don't be a slave to the Deuteronomist. I will buy that T-shirt.
read Chronicles.
Make it.
Yeah. Latter-day Chattel by 30. So this may be something that may be kind of a surprise to you, okay? Because I don't think we've talked about it in Sunday school. And if you just read the Sunday school passages, this may be new. David appoints prophetic musicians into the temple. Okay, so I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. Moreover, David and the captains of the host separated to the service of the sons of Asaph and of Haman and of Yeduthun, so these are like the founders of 3 guilds here, because like sons of the prophet or the sons of Asaph are the followers. So like the visionary men would have been the sons of Isaiah, okay, who should prophesy with harps, and that is in fact the verb nevah, and these guys are called nevi'im. These are prophets.
prophets.
With psalteries and with cymbals, and the number of workmen according to their service was of the sons of Asaph, Zakur and Joseph, and Nethaniah and Azarela, the sons of Asaph under the hands of Asaph, which prophesied according to the order of the king. And then in verse 3, who prophesied with a harp. Okay, these are prophets who are musical, and they are cultic in the sense that they are associated with the temple.
Okay, so cult means like temple.
They're in the temple.
Ritual.
It's a really good 80s rock band.
Okay.
Some prophets are sometimes described as being anti-cultic, which usually that's an exaggeration. But if a prophet sort of says some things like, "Hey, your sacrifices are meaningless.
Yep.
You need to have a broken heart and a contrite spirit." Sometimes commentators will say this is an anti-cultic prophet, meaning he's not part of the hierarchy. He's condemning the hierarchy. Okay. That's probably an exaggeration, because probably really you have prophets who have more complex connections with the hierarchy than just I'm for it or I'm against it.
Strange.
Right.
So what you're saying is that there are musical prophets
Correct.
that David puts into the temple.
Correct.
And so what you're saying is that the Catholics aren't as weird as I thought they were before.
This is actually an important lesson to take away for life.
By the
is
way,
that
I
Catholics are
love
not
the
as
Catholics.
weird
I
as
know,
you
but
might think.
I went to Catholic mass multiple times on my mission in Hungary, and I always just thought it was so weird that they would like sing these things, and I just found it to be very strange because we don't do that. We sing hymns, but you don't have one guy that sings, and he's not that good at singing, and he's singing in a language that nobody understands. I found that to be very strange.
Well, so this is interesting. This is a connection he does not make, okay? But in the visions,
smarter
in, say,
than you.
Isaiah 6, you are clearly smarter than Aubrey R. Johnson. Well done. is who sings in the temple in, say, Isaiah 6? The answer is angels.
Mm.
Angels sing in the temple. And so in the drama of
Which just
it,
means messengers.
in the liturgy, if those things are happening, in meat space, right? Who's doing the singing? Well, it's probably these guys.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, this is like a giant maybe. Someone's gonna get mad and say, "No, Dave, alternate history." Nacho Libre is probably working up to come after me right now.
Whoever that is who made that comment, you have a
Yes,
Nacho
you know
Libre
who you
profile
are.
picture.
Oh,
It's
So-
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I was like, who looks like Jack Black? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when Josiah destroys the houses of the holy ones, which are next to the temple. Holy ones is another way to say angels or sons of God.
Kodashim.
Maybe those are musical prophets who participate in temple worship as angels, and he doesn't like their form of cult, their form of worship, right? And that's a big maybe. It's a big maybe, right?
Can I just jump in with cult really quick, 30 seconds? So cult means care of. So agriculture
cultivate.
Cultivate. Agriculture is the care of the land. So cult is the care of the god. Cultic prophets and priests cared for the god. In the ancient world, when you this is just my background because I read all this Greek stuff in school. You would put the fat and the meat on the altar and you would burn it. It would make a sweet smelling savor to Apollo. And you were taking care of Apollo by feeding him, by showing him your oblations. And so cultic is, as Dave says, the temple stuff that you do, but it's like the care of the god. And so it shouldn't freak us out. Now, in our modern vernacular, cult means group. Like the Boy Scouts of America is a cult, or
Absolutely.
Taylor Swift fans are a cult. It's a group
Republicans,
of people. Republicans,
Democrats,
Libertarians, Green Party, they are cults. They are groups. They identify. But cult also has like a negative, spooky bit because we talk about Jim Jones and drinking Kool-Aid. And so when people say, oh, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are a cult, they're trying to push you into the Jim Jones bit. And I always say, no,
Well,
you keep
yes,
using that word.
yes,
I don't think
we
it
are a
means
cult,
what you
but
think it
yeah,
means.
but you're not using it right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Cultic just means like the formal religion, like worship. Think about cultic as meaning worship, or cult is worship in a scholarly context.
not the colloquial term of a religion I don't like.
Right. But
Right.
that's how it's
Yeah.
used today. Yeah.
Sure. English is just funny. I mean, you know where the word fan comes from?
OnlyFans?
Like
Oh,
Brad, I'm on your OnlyFans page. No,
Oh, no.
like fan is of course fanatic,
Yeah.
but it comes from the Latin fanum, which is a temple. So this is just English is funny, right? You say I'm your fan, you're saying I'm your temple worshiper.
Yeah.
I'm your devotee.
worship you.
And that's
yeah.
where we
So
get the word
English is
profane.
just funny. So don't get bogged
Interesting.
down in English. Cultic just means the formal religion, worship. Here it's the temple. These are prophets in the temple.
Yeah.
Psalmody just means the Psalms. So it's the temple prophets. It's these guys, these three musical guilds who eventually become just musicians. Johnson says maybe they lose a lot of credit when they prophesy peace before the Babylonians come in. Don't worry, it will be peace. Don't worry, it will be peace. Jeremiah says, you say peace, but there is no peace. And then, in fact, there is no peace. Babylon wipes them out. And at that point, Johnson says probably these guys lost all credit and became just musicians. No one saw them as prophets anymore. But until then, you had these instrument-playing, song-singing prophets in the temple.
Very strange and very different to how most Christians believe. But like I said, there is that Catholic. And the more we dove into First Temple theology and all this sort of stuff, you realize that a lot of the liturgy is contained within the Catholic Mass.
It
which
is.
I find to be very
100%.
I need to go back. I want to go to Mass, and I need to open my eyes and be open. And we talk a lot of times, and this isn't explicitly said, as far as I know, by any prophets. But we look at the abominable church in the Book of Mormon. We're like the Catholics, right? But that isn't what it is.
Yeah.
And they held they hold pieces of the whole just as other Christian
Just
sects
as
hold
others do,
pieces
just as
of
the
whole.
Orthodox, just
Maybe?
as Jews,
Maybe
just
more?
as
Maybe more. Maybe
Then
they
some-
weren't
yeah.
that bad.
just
know?
just as I suspect some kinds of Islam carry pieces, right? There is a shattered, a fragmented tradition, right? What was really done and known in the first temple, and we have an incomplete restoration of it, right?
It's
So
still
That's still in
happening.
process.
that's
Yeah.
still in process. So yeah, we should be humble and open to the possibility of light and knowledge from all kinds of directions.
Okay, cool. So so the basic thesis of this book is there are these singing prophets.
Yeah.
But what happened to those singing prophets?
And what did they sing?
And what did they sing? And why were they
Like, was it
singing?
a secret chord that David played and it
Please the
Please the
Lord.
pleased the Lord? Yeah, that.
You don't really care for music, do you? Yeah.
The book's divided into 3 parts.
That was
So
amazing.
part 3 is the biggest. It's like
Okay.
the massivest part. The first part is, he titles it "The Responsibility of the Cultic Prophet." Like, what's his job? And he really hammers on Psalm 81, Psalm 95, 50, and then he gets into what's called the Song of the Sea, or the Song of Miriam, Exodus 15. And then Exodus 19, he opens up with this question. And he doesn't really answer it, but the question is, what do we do with Exodus 19 in the first 6 verses, where Yahweh comes to Moses before the Sinai covenant is made, and he says, "My desire is to make you guys my segula, my precious treasure, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to make you a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." And the question that he asks is, does he really mean this, or is this like...
Oh, interesting.
Do you see what I'm going here?
Yeah.
And so I have a take where I'm like, I'm going to take a position on that. And then the second chapter is called "The Prophetic Role." Sorry, I can't read.
Real quick, is the cultic prophet what we would understand as the high priest of the temple?
I think to put it to make a probably crude, possibly offensive, and only partially accurate comparison.
Yes, that would be.
I think if you
So
imagine
no.
that sort of temple workers and temple presidents
Yes.
sang and performed and probably danced and were, when moved by the Spirit, prophesied, I think that's what
That's
it
what
is.
it would be.
Dude,
Okay,
your
cool.
phone has the coolest little things that pop up. Like, when people call you, the different things come up.
Yeah,
Like, can I just show this to the audience?
sure.
This is so dope. So I don't even know what this book is, but there's a dog
No, that's just
with
my
a
background.
bow and arrow. No, you have different ones. And then a dude with a
He's
sword,
telling you what
and
actually
another
happens.
dude. No, like, you've had... Dude. Anyway, I don't know what this book is called. But there's like... It's so cool. I don't know if you can zoom in on that, but... I mean,
Cool
just
book.
look at that screen.
Uh,
Sorry, that was distracting.
so let me make a comment on part one, though.
Okay,
So,
yeah. So, but I want to get to part 2 and 3. But yeah,
I agree.
Giddy up, giddy up.
One of the things, this is principally an exploration of the Psalms, right? So in a way, this book becomes a commentary on the Psalms in connection with, from the point of view of thinking about these prophets. What are they doing? How do they do it? What are their main doctrines? What are their sort of stereotyped phrases? But he starts outside the Psalms, looking at, among other things, prophetesses. So he looks at Miriam and he looks at Deborah. And so, although we're principally using the word prophets, actually he says quite explicitly these seem to have been men and also women. There were prophetesses, and Deborah and Miriam are examples, but also Huldah, who Josiah goes to consult in 2 Kings 23. All seem, their language and their actions all seem consistent with this cultic prophet idea.
Okay, part 2, the prophetic role during national crisis, and like what it means to the nation. And that's where we get into the Song of Deborah in Judges 5. That's a big chapter. And then Deuteronomy 32 is a really big chapter. By this I mean text. There's text that he's like surveying, and then he's surveying a bunch of the Psalms, like Psalm 74, 90, and 91, and he's dating these Psalms and these ideas to what he calls the early monarchy. There's a big discussion in scholarship, when were the Psalms written? And Aubrey Johnson's position is a lot of these Psalms are written during the time period of David. So we're talking 1000 BC. Okay. And then the third chapter, and this is the biggest part, is the prophet's responsibility for the life of the individual as recognizable in times of crisis. And so he's asking the question, how did the Psalms work in the lives of Israel when there were times of crisis? And so some of the crises are going to be things like the destruction of the temple or when enemies attack them. And so those are the three parts. In my opinion, this is just my opinion. I'm gonna say my beef with this book. I'm not a Roman numeral fan. I grew up learning
Yes.
Roman
It's hard
numerals.
to see.
He never tells you what he's quoting. He just starts quoting, and he's not using King James. And so he'll say,
Yeah.
let me hear what God's word may be. Yahweh's word, I'm just reading off page 205. Yahweh's word is indeed one of peace to his people, to his votaries, but let there be no reverting to folly. And you read that and you go, first of all, that's not King James. Second of all, where are we?
Yeah.
And so let me tell you my life hack. If you buy this book and you're really going to read it, this is what you do. You type in those first three sentences into ChatGPT and say, where is this? And ChatGPT will always show you where it is. And then I will go and write in my scriptures, oh, he's doing Psalm this, or he's doing, like my whole book is marked up because every time I'm like, I don't even know what you're quoting, bro, because you're not quoting even my translation of the text. So,
Right.
so that's kind of that's a beef that I have. Where if he was publishing with your publishing company, you would say, "Bro, you need to tell the audience where you are."
If we were to reprint this, yeah.
Yes.
So there, yeah, he'll be like in Psalm LXXVI, and then like for 6 or 7 pages, he'll be talking about Psalm 86. But if you forget, you're like, wait a minute, where are we?
But he'll skip around.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Oh,
dude, I don't
dang.
even like it
Yeah.
when they do it for the Super Bowl.
It's so
Just tell me what
confusing.
Super Bowl this is.
Tell me which one.
LXCIV1. I
don't know.
Speak English.
Yeah. So,
But other than that, amazing.
Those
book.
are my those are my
It's
big
about-
beefs.
Those are your only beefs.
And no pictures. They don't have
So-
pictures.
So obviously the Psalms, since as far as we know, have been called Psalms, which mean they're musical, that they're sung, correct? But you pointed out that like the Song of Deborah in Judges 5, right? How do we know that that is a psalm? And how much of the Old Testament do you think was written as ritual song like this? Do you think a lot of the stories are? And I just kind of want to know more about the structure.
Well, this is kind of, we talked about form criticism, I think, last time, but possibly next time,
tell our audience
depending
about
on the
what it
order.
is. Yeah.
that we release. on.
But this is, people will make arguments about this and say, look, this passage is heavily metrical, and look, it gets more alliterative, and so I think this unit is a song. Sometimes it's identified. Look at Exodus 15. It says Moses comes out and leads the children of Israel singing this stuff, and then it goes on for
And then it
like
says it.
18 verses, and then it says, and Miriam led the daughters of Israel
in a diss track
and-
against the
and then
Egyptians.
y'all suck. No,
I love diss tracks.
and it's interesting, right? It only gives like 2 lines that Miriam says, but actually, what we should understand is not that she only sang 2 lines, is that the author didn't want to repeat the whole bit. It was a strophe and antistrophe, and Moses and the men, Miriam, and I think actually Aubrey talks about this.
Tell our people what a strophe and antistrophe is. That's not a common term.
A call and response, a verse and a reply verse, right?
Okay.
So
a
that they're
duet.
singing a song together. It's a duet.
Turn around.
Right.
Every now and then I see.
Oh, it's called a musical. Last time was Star Wars.
Yeah.
So, in other words, it wasn't a big song by Moses and the men and a little bit by the women. It's a song together, and Moses leads the men, and Miriam, and it says it's a song, and Miriam, who is identified as a prophetess, leads the women. Right. So Exodus 15 says, "I am a song." In other places, it's form criticism. Does it look like a song? Right? Does it have even rhyme sometimes? Well, rhyme's not the principal feature.
Or like a meter.
But does it alliterate? Does it have a
Yeah.
meter? Does it seem like a song?
Which in English you don't get a lot of that. You have to go to the original to really get the feeling of that, right? Because they're not translating.
It helps.
It helps.
It helps a ton. You are at the mercy of the translator if you can't read the original language. That is the sad truth.
Yeah, there's something really strange about music. Let's kind of go on a tangent here. This isn't going to be super related to your book. but
We
just,
hate
like,
tangents.
Generally speaking,
We've never gone on one
That's
before.
all I do is tangents.
there's something really important about music, right? Music will literally bring people to tears. You don't even have to understand the words. There doesn't even have to be words in order for it to bring you to tears. And so I do find it very interesting that there is this undertone through the Old Testament of singing priests, of music. And I'm pretty sure music is used as an alliteration multiple times. Or alliteration isn't the right word, is it? Or it's used as a description of things. Like I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but why do you think that is? What is it about music that
I think it
God
does what you're
uses?
saying. It communicates through feeling and rhyme what you cannot speak. There are things that I feel in a song, and they're not even saying the right words, but they paint pictures and they resonate with my soul, and it moves me.
And to me, I think it's a really good way for God to keep us in check with our mind and our heart, right?
love that.
Because we so often get hung up in just our mind or sometimes just our heart. And if we go either of those directions, we can get lost, right? And I think music kind of requires both, because you end up having the meter that you're following, but you also have the beauty of what's coming out actually be a thing there. And I think there's something to that, where you have both your mind and your heart open to understanding God.
Yeah, and without getting too hippy dippy, wearing our flip flops and walking, grounding ourselves, there is something about like frequencies of music and things like that actually like literally resonate within our
Well,
bodies.
there's nothing hippy dippy about it. You can cause things to burst into flame by using
Sound.
sound.
You can
right?
pick
Are you
things up
serious?
as well.
Yeah, physics.
You can levitate things by
You can
cymatics.
destroy
Yeah.
things with sound.
I've never heard
Yeah.
this.
Sure you have. The right pitch will shatter a glass window.
It's true.
But light stuff on fire?
And pick things up, like they will pick up rocks, now,
Harmonic
things like that.
levitation.
A lot of people think that the way the pyramids, not a lot of people, but there are people that think that the
We are
pyramids
definitely
were
on
built
dirt road here.
yeah, we're on a dirt road, but there are people that believe that the pyramids were built through this through using sound, and there was vibration, and they were able to pick up.
Which,
and
if
move
so,
the
it was
blocks.
probably their cultic prophets who were out there singing and moving the rocks.
Exactly.
Yeah. It brought us back home.
There we
Okay,
go.
okay, I'm going to come down to like scripture. So
Okay.
DNC 25.
Dude,
DNC
spontaneous combustion. This is how it's thought to happen. Is like, that people just occasionally, for no apparent reason, burst into flame. This is a thing, right?
I did not know
What?
this. So, by the way, this is what you just said. So, I have a brother named
Okay.
Robbie. I'm gonna go two different roads. I have a brother named Robbie who got in a lot of trouble, and one day he took a lighter and hairspray.
This is
like
not spontaneous combustion.
and he got bored during a video during class, so he sprayed his desk with hairspray. Took a lighter, boom. His whole desk went up in flames.
Oh, man.
And the teacher came over because he was always getting suspended.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
teacher came over and grabbed him by the ear. "What are you doing?" And Robbie's like, "It's spontaneously combusted." It's one of my favorite stories. So, Robbie, if you're watching, yes, I'm thinking of you right now, bro. I don't know why I'm going down that route. Okay, here we go. Back to DNC 25 to be
Okay.
normal. The Lord says to Emma, "The song of the righteous is a prayer unto me." So whether we're talking about levitation, which is way outside, I'm not qualified to talk about that. I will say, for me, spiritually, when I participate in the sacrament hymn, it is a prayer. And I feel something that I cannot explain. And the Spirit bears witness to me that the stuff we're singing, even though mentally it may not make sense, that a person died and rose again, I feel it and know it by the Spirit.
And I think it makes me think of when we were in Jerusalem
Mm.
and as we went out around in Jordan and everything and hearing the prayers sung,
Oh yeah,
I think that's
Mhm.
really fascinating that
it's true. Yeah, you have like when you're in Middle Eastern countries, right? 5 times a day, you have the prayers sung
Muezzin.
over.
Yep.
So once again, you have another instance where there is this ancient tradition of singing priests.
I love it.
Yeah.
Strange. That's,
And there's something cosmic. There's long been an old ideas that music is connected with the cosmos, that the cosmos is musical or makes music, right? And it's easy to see like as a metaphor from like an Enlightenment Western point of view, right? The complexity of music and the way it harmonizes and also moves and returns has a feel like a working cosmos, right? So like on a metaphorical level, music can kind of function, or dance can kind of connect us to cultic, to religious, to temple ideas.
Yeah.
This is a book I want to review one day, but you can't get it yet. It's called The Dance of Adam. It's called Choros. It's in Greek. The Dance of Adam, the making of Byzantine choreography, the anthropology of the choir dance in Byzantium. And this, I know, total
That's
nerdy
wild.
title.
Not on Amazon.
This whole, but it will be.
I looked.
It will be. This whole book is filled with this idea of the muses, the circle dance, and she calls it the dance of Adam. And over again, she shows this picture of the anastasis. I don't know if the camera can zoom in on that.
Move the book to your right.
Okay, this is on page, I don't know. This is figure 88 in her book, and over again in the anastasis narrative, she shows images of the Son of God grabbing Adam and Eve by their wrists. In his right hand, typically he's grabbing Adam. In his left, he's grabbing Eve as a sign of the resurrection, but it's also part of the dance. And she shows vase paintings and all these images of people holding each other usually by the wrist in a dance. And she talks about how it's a circle, and the early Christians had, she calls them Christian circles or Christian dances, but sometimes she calls them hymns or prayer. She says Christian prayer circles, and she talks about how this came out of the ancient tradition. Now, when she's talking about this, I go to Hesiod and Theogony, because Hesiod talks about that he's told the creation story by these muses that come down in a circle, and they're singing in a circle about the gods and the creation. And so this isn't something that's just in a corner.
Singing
This
and
is
prayer can be, you can look at them as synonymous.
right. There's some interchange here, but there's also this idea of choros, where we get the word for choir. It comes from choros, which means to make space or to have a place to dance or to be in a circle. These are all etymologically related terms. And so it's fascinating when you read this stuff because I see the connection. Now, this author doesn't say it, but I'm just, once again, going down a 30-second dirt road to say, if we open up our minds a little bit, this isn't just happening in one place. This is happening throughout the ancient tradition. I'm plugging you,
Jack
Logan,
whoever you are.
Jack Logan, whoever you are. I am Mike Day. I'm your #1 super fan, and I happen to think that you're amazing. I want to meet you, and we need to get you on Stick of Joseph, and I love
we
your
can keep
stuff.
you anonymous.
But Jack Logan, I got to tell you, yeah, we could even do the we're behind the screen where we blur out your face. That would be epic, right? And like, Jack, what do you think? I think that it would be awesome. So, Jack, if you're listening,
yeah,
or if you know Jack Logan,
let us know.
Mike Day, #1 super fan. I love your stuff. So back to this. It's part of the ancient tradition.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. So I have 2 dirt roads then.
Okay.
So
I got a
one,
dirt road too.
to touch back on our last discussion, we were reading John Eaton's The Festal Drama in Deutero-Isaiah. You led us to read Psalm 110, and there's a reference to the Lord being on the right hand of the king. And a comment I did not make last time was that Eaton talks about repeatedly.
Make sure you talk in the mic. You're getting kind of far away.
A comment I did not make last time, but that Eaton talks about repeatedly, is that one of the images in the psalm is the Lord sustaining the king by grasping him by the right hand. So it's interesting that the dance is the Lord is grasping Adam's right hand. So that's a thing. Also, the Hag, the pilgrim journey to Jerusalem, which in ancient times, the obligation on the Israelite man or the adult Israelite, I think it's the men, was to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year to appear before the Lord. It's a Hag, which probably comes from Haggah, which is to dance in a circle.
Yeah.
So the pilgrim journey, by the way, Hajj, the Hajj to Mecca, is the same word. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And they
Which, by the way, they go
circumnavigate
and they dance in a circle.
around the
right?
Kaaba.
So
They're doing a prayer. They do
yes,
a prayer circle
yes.
in Mecca.
again, Islam, I think, has a lot of
In
is
white.
one of the heirs of this fragmented tradition.
Wow.
Yeah. So
And by the way, that Hag is in the Hebrew Old Testament. A lot of times it's translated as like the procession or the festival or the feast. But in the Hebrew, and a lot of scholars are talking about this, the idea is that they come to the altar in a circle, a procession in song or dance or both.
Wow. So when you have like a chorus of angels, it's just like I got to reread the scriptures all again now with all this musical background.
It's 1 Nephi 1.
Because you have this
Correct.
you hear things about concourses of angels
Yes.
singing in
Yes.
praise, right?
And by the way-
Hugh Nibley says that's a circle, by the way.
Yeah.
And by the way, why does Alma quote it word for word?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's seeing exactly the same thing, because those are ordinance experiences.
happening in the temple.
And man, songs are way easier to remember
Yes.
than just normal
Well,
trying to remember.
That's where
Boy,
poetry.
that's true,
That's where they
actually.
say poetry comes from. I don't know if this is really, but they say because it's easier to remember something if it rhymes.
Also, it impresses ladies.
And it impresses the ladies, right?
Which is the key to everything.
So to kind of wrap
That's
up,
one of the basic
to wrap up
roots.
this one part right here,
This is a huge dirt road.
what you're saying, though, is that there are non-LDS sources that talk about how anciently there were circles of people that would hold each other by the wrists in a circle, and they would sing or pray together as a Christian, and they'd call it a Christian circle.
There's
I
lots
mean,
of that stuff.
There's different names for it, but that's not what I'm saying. That's what Nicoletta Assar is saying, and then
Yes.
she's showing it to you in the ancient texts and
in
in
Byzantine
Yeah.
tradition.
Yeah.
And when
But-
was the scholarship done? Like,
This is a brand new book. This is something because I'm in my dissertation writing. I'm just nerding out on this stuff because I'm reading all these books that no normal people read, and it's every page is marked up. I love it. So anyway, and like I said, this little sleeve means I don't own it.
it's
I
just
gotta buy
becoming
it.
it's just becoming untenable for me to ever believe that the temple was made up by
Or just
Joseph Smith
copied off of Masons.
or not
you know?
ancient.
There's so
Right.
much more to it.
It's just
Yeah.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, where are we going to go?
Yeah,
in this
what
book,
else do we-
bro?
what
'cause
else do we
I
got
got
from
So I
book.
think
15
you were
points of
still
light, but
walking
there's-
us through the
Oh,
three parts.
Did we do the third part?
I don't think we talked about
We
the
didn't
third
do the
part.
Okay,
third
I
part,
have
no.
totally lost my spoon. Here we go. Got to get back to this.
Yeah, let's get to it.
Okay, so the third part is the let's see how here it is. The prophet's responsibility for the life of the individuals as recognizable in times of crisis. Okay, what does that mean? So the cultic prophet is a role to help you deal with crisis as an individual. So part 2 is for the nation. Part 3 is for how does it help me individually? And he talks about the Song of Hannah. He talks about several of the Psalms, specifically 143, 63, 30, 32. There's a bunch of those in there. But he gets into this idea that the liturgy of the temple was to help you individually in times of crisis. Now, I'm going to translate that for a Latter-day Saint audience. Have you ever heard someone say, go to the temple with your personal issues and lay those on the altar and you will come home with more information? I mean, yes, we're practicing liturgy, we're doing work vicariously for those that have passed, but it also has individual application. Now, he's not saying it that way. I'm translating Aubrey Johnson. So anyway, those are the three parts. Like I said, the third part is the biggest. For me, I'll just say this. Once again, he's using a lot of the ideas that are also, in my opinion, in this book that are really helpful. And this is, and I don't know, did I talk about this book?
Yeah, you talked about
Okay,
it.
the things that are in this text, I think it's better in here for a Latter-day Saint audience, but LeGrand Baker and Stephen Ricks are really quoting guys like Aubrey Johnson. So this came first, if we're talking chicken and egg. This came first, and this is his analysis of how the Psalms operated anciently. And his argument is this, that the Psalms are really old, that they weren't part of the Deuteronomist reworking of the text, but this is like the OG religion, I think is probably one of the things he would say.
He does, yeah. He in fact specifically says OG. He says this is the original gangster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
OG
but
means original, sorry.
he does say he says, look, there are claims that the Psalms are late and are that have been rewritten by the Deuteronomic school, and his argument is no. What you've got here is the prophetic guilds had certain stereotyped language and they had certain doctrines, and Deuteronomy and other writings, later prophets, borrow from Psalms. So his argument is the Psalms is the older, the original. Where those coincide, it's not because Deuteronomy has rewritten the Psalms, or Deuteronomists have rewritten the Psalms. It's the other way around, is they have been influenced by the cult, which is embedded in the Psalms. I think let's talk about, like, kind of at a high level. There's so much detail, right? It's like some 430-page book or
Yeah,
something.
it's pretty big.
By the way, here's a as you can see, Into the Mind of Dave. When I'm reading nonfiction, I prepare my own indices. So this is like page number and things that Dave thought was cool.
Cool. That's smart.
And this is what I fill up the back parts of the book with. So if I go to reread a book, sometimes I'll start by going in the back and reminding myself what did I
Cool
think was
stuff,
cool
yeah.
previous times I read. So, some high level stuff here.
That was where I was going to start right there.
Oh, okay, awesome. So the Navi, the prophet, is a temple position. What does he do? Fundamentally, he leads people to God. He or she, they lead people to God, and they bring about shalom. Right.
Oh, by the way, every time I read that, I thought of your first book,
Yeah.
Plain and Precious Things. I think that was the first time I read a Latter-day Saint talk about that. Talk about what shalom is.
Yes. So shalom is conventionally translated as peace. It means more than peace. It means well-being, health, perfection. In modern Hebrew, it's a way to say hi. Shalom, shalom, ma shalomcha, right? You're wishing somebody peace, completion, perfection. So in the language of Adam, I have argued that it is a temple blessing that you get on the way to meet God, right? So that's consistent with Aubrey's picture, at least at a high level here. Because I think that's what Matthew 5:48 says. When Matthew 5:48 says, you will be perfect, I think that perfect, the word there is shalem, meaning one who is in a state of shalom. And you are on your and you become that as you progress into the temple.
I mean, we're reading Greek, so it's teleos, but what Dave is saying is the word the Savior would have used
Is shalom.
is shalom.
And it's just a way of explaining you are one of the initiated ones. It's kind of like you talk about how the peaceable followers of Christ are
of Christ,
those
absolutely.
who have gone through this ritual and received that peace, right?
That's a whole different way
I'm
to
gonna do a
read that.
shameless plug. You got to get this book if you like Dave, if you like Mike. There's also 10 hours of bonus footage of Mike and Dave talking about what's in this book. Plus, when you buy the hardcover copy or any of the copies, you also get the audiobook with it. So,
Yeah, boom. A lot of value.
You got to get that
And
because
it's
you talk a
Dave.
lot of these things.
It's Dave reading it to you.
It
Yeah,
is.
it's
It
Dave
is.
reading.
You
Dave
can get
reading.
more of Dave's voice in your
That
life.
is, yeah, it's very good for putting people to sleep. I've been told.
So you're talking. So it's referencing. It's talking about shalom in here.
Yeah,
Yes.
the liturgical prophet, the cult prophet, helps you acquire, helps you individually, helps you the kingdom acquire shalom. And again, this is the failure. Aubrey Johnson argues at the end is that they were still saying, "Don't worry, shalom. Don't worry, peace," and then Babylon overtook them, and so they lost credibility.
Dave, let me read this bit. This is
Yeah.
page 30. You've actually got it on your Dave's highlights that are awesome.
Okay.
So, what is the role of the cultic prophet? Aubrey Johnson really summarizes it, in my opinion, on page 30 in the second paragraph. He says, "It seems that we must now think of the cultic prophet at his best as being concerned not only with the shaping of Israel's history for the future, so they're historians, but also with the fundamental task of preserving the traditions of the nation's past and thus keeping the covenant alive in each successive generation as the assured means of establishing the welfare, the shalom of his fellow countrymen." Okay, what are his roles? Think about this and think about what it means to be a teacher in the church. We're to preserve the traditions, we're to keep the covenant alive in the minds and hearts of our people, and we're to make sure that the history is told right of our past to point our children towards the future.
Interesting.
I mean, think about what that means.
yeah. So you could kind of say, so because Jerusalem is Yerushalayim, right?
Shalayim.
Yerushalayim, which translates to city of peace, right? When it falls into apostasy, it kind of doesn't become Jerusalem anymore. Like it should have a different name at
They
that point,
yeah,
right?
Hadrian changes it to Eliana Capitolina, if I'm saying that right. He basically
he actually
dedicates it. He
changes
changes the
it.
name, puts a temple to Jupiter and Venus right on the Temple Mount,
Oh, wow.
and then that's there till Helena and Constantine come in and said, no more. And
Oh,
then
I
they
didn't
come
really
in and
know
rip that stuff down. Yeah. So Hadrian does rename the city for a period of time, and then it's
that's-
Constantine in like the 4th century.
That's pretty cool because I was just saying symbolically, like that what makes Jerusalem the city of peace is that there is a Navi, a prophet there that is leading people to peace.
Through the
Yeah,
doing
that's
those
interesting.
things.
Yeah.
There's a think about that passage also, by the way, in connection with like Is it Alma 37 and 38 where Alma is talking to his son Helaman, and it's like we get hints all along about what it looks like when one plate keeper passes the plates on to the next person, but like we get a real discussion about it between Alma and Helaman, from Alma to Helaman, and like, hey, preserving continuity, the traditions of the fathers in order to be able to keep the covenant and get a good future, right? Like,
Isn't that kind of what the Book of Mormon prophets are into? I don't know. I'm just wondering.
right? So that may be an interesting gloss under which to think about what the Nephite prophets are doing, right? Here's another kind of real high-level take on these guys, and this is super interesting to me because Aubrey, he repeatedly hits this point throughout the book, but he never gets to the so what until the epilogue when he briefly goes, like, here's why I kept saying this.
I know. He never says it to the last page, bro.
And it's literally the last page. And it's kind of awesome. And I got to Aubrey the other direction. So one of the things I learned from David Montgomery, one of my mentors in college, was read footnotes. So, if you like what you're reading the text, go to the footnote. If it's quoting a book, go get that book and read it. Right? And so much of my reading experience in the last 30 years has been basically chasing through footnotes to new books. Okay? So I read Aubrey Johnson's name in footnotes in books by Margaret Barker, and then went back and started reading Aubrey Johnson stuff. So I intend to ask her when I meet her someday how she sees her own kind of intellectual inheritance, like what were her influences. I bet Aubrey Johnson will come up because I think this is sort of a proto-Margaret Barker point. Okay, he says there are two things that hits on over and over again, usually together. He says the repeated theme of the Psalms, and this seems to have been the key idea of the cultic prophets, is the way, the truth, and the life.
Oh,
And life is the goal, and the way. Derech is taking you to Chaim, life. And this is strictly consistent with the Sermon on the Mount, where you pass through the straight and narrow gate into the presence of life, which is a tree with good fruits. Okay,
Dave, what page is that on?
It's
Sorry
on
to
a bunch.
interrupt
So it's page 251 is an example, but I jotted down a bunch here.
I remember
also
highlighting that, going, I see. What
it's
you're
in there
doing.
like a ton of times. So and the truth is faithfulness to your covenants. Okay.
So once you understand the way, you stay on the way.
You stay on the way. You keep the commandments, right? So this is their basic idea is following the road by keeping your covenants and entering into the presence of life. This is the basic idea of the cultic prophets, right? How interesting is that?
One might say the covenant path.
The covenant path.
That's one way of saying
I
it.
don't know who would say that, but yeah, interesting.
That's an interesting synonym. And the other idea, the repeated theme that goes with that, or motif, is that the righteous will live by his faith. He calls this their principle. Their repeated principle is the righteous will live by his faith. And like over and over again, he only admits it at the very end. But what he's doing is he's saying, look, what are the roots of Christianity? They are in the first temple, but they're not necessarily in following the law of Moses. They're in some other part of the first temple. And he's saying some of it is in the Psalms and in these cultic prophets, right? In these with their idea of the way, the truth, and the life. This is Christ identifies himself as the way, the truth, and the life. And the righteous will live by his faith, which, by the way, it's super interesting. So you mentioned the Song of Hannah. So he talks about the Song of Deborah, the Song of Miriam, the Song of Hannah as examples of women who are cultic prophetesses. Who is the woman at the temple who recognizes Jesus when he shows up as a baby? It's Anna, which is just Hannah, right? So like, and this is like a whole other. Okay, I'm gonna do this. Okay,
Do it.
By the way, this is why we love this stuff.
Buckle up.
The dirt roads with Dave.
this is a dirt road.
That's
okay?
what we should. We have to have another show called Dirt Roads.
Dirt roads with Dave.
Dirt
I
roads
really want to do like a
Where
third
will-
Nephi liturgy of Second Isaiah
We
in.
need to. That'd be
And
awesome.
we'll get to the core of spontaneous combustion there.
Yeah,
too.
We will
By the
come
way,
back to spontaneous combustion.
I'm calling you out on that. I just don't believe the whole levitation.
People,
That's
you
like.
don't believe in spontaneous combustion.
I'm just saying that's like D&D magic level.
Yeah.
Luke
Well, okay,
Skywalker.
levitation
Force.
thing's
okay.
real.
We're gonna next week spontaneous combustion. Okay.
So we're, by the
Luke
way, we're
Luke 2.
Okay.
Luke 2.
So we're gonna file this under a couple of a couple of headings. One heading is, hey, did these temple prophets ever really go away? Another heading is, I am sorry to say this, but if you can't read it in the original language, you are vulnerable to being misled. Okay, that's part of the heading here. Okay, now
Luke 2, you said?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
going to read verse
The way,
49.
the
But
truth,
let's
and
set
the
up
life. I
the
can't stop
let's set up the
thinking about it.
background of verse 40. So Luke, so Jesus is young. His parents come to present him at the temple. Then they forget him, as you do with your only child, and they head home. Okay, I mean, I've been forgotten as a kid.
Only child, though.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
Is it
Wait,
Kevin?
Didn't we have a kid? So okay.
Is it Kevin from Home Alone? Is that his name, Kevin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
So they realize they've gone on Jay's journey. They look for him among. And this is actually important. Verse 44. Their kinsfolk and acquaintance. So they look for him among their people. Okay, and then they go back and find him at the temple, and they say, verse 48. Whoa, son, you've been bad. Verse 49. This is the key thing. And he said unto them, how is it that ye sought me? Wist ye not? Didn't you know? Wist ye not that I must be about my Father's business? Okay? Wist ye not that I must be about my Father's business? Now, interestingly, if you pull up parallel translations, look at other English translations, some of them are significantly different. Because instead of saying, don't you know, like a modern version of this will say, didn't you know I would be about my Father's business, right? But there are translations that say, didn't you know I would be in my Father's house? That's weird. What's going on? Do we have, remember the underlying language here that as we have it is Greek. Do we have a word in Greek that means both house and business? No. It turns out what we have is that there's no word there at all. The Greek says en tois tu patrosmu, which literally means in thee of my father. And you have to guess what the missing noun is. Now,
Strange.
yeah, the word thee is plural. It's dative, but don't worry about that. It's plural, and it's either masculine or neuter. Okay? So the two guesses that are being made, some people are guessing, oh, well, you know, the temple is multiple buildings, so it's you know, it's a plural neuter. This may be right. The problem is that the New Testament doesn't refer to the temple with a plural. It's tonaon or tohieron, okay? Tohieron. So it is a singular. So why would it in this one passage talk about the temple as a plural? So my Father's house seems like a bum translation.
Okay.
About my Father's business is a little better. In the of my Father, in the affairs
Could you
of my
say
Father.
in the things of my Father?
In the things of my Father.
Which is really interesting.
But there is a better translation. There is a better. You have all been lied to. This verse, the translation you've been reading has been lying
Get
to
out
you.
your red
and I'm going to
markers
tell
and
you
mark
why.
it out.
Here's why. Anti-Semitism.
Really?
Yes. Let me show you this. Okay.
En tois
This
tu
is getting
patros
wild.
mude
Mike,
enaime.
if you read Greek.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here.
What is the if you read that article tois as a masculine, and tois among those of my Father, what's the most natural reading for tois? What does it refer to?
Temple priests.
People, right?
Well, I'm thinking temple priests because that's
yeah.
where it is.
You're getting more
people.
specific, but tois men.
Yeah.
If you said hoi over there, like without a noun, you would assume the article refers to men.
Right.
Which means what the passage might say is, didn't you know I would be among my Father's people? Now, by the way, how do we know this is the correct understanding? Go look at verse 44. When they can't find him, where do they look?
Among their kinsfolk.
They look among his father's people, thinking his father is Joseph. Then they find him among his father's real father's people, which are the teachers is what it says, right? Verse 46, the doctors, who I think are didaskaloi, teachers, is I think what it means. His real father's people are the teachers who are at the temple. Now, Father Raymond Brown, talking about this passage, pointed out that this was an option for translating, but said it's obvious there's no way Jesus could refer to the people in the temple as, with
His-
approval
his
as his father's people,
Yeah.
right?
But he
So,
calls it his father's house.
A,
Jesus didn't like the temple because temple bad, right?
yeah, A, anti-Semitism,
Mm.
B, Christian failure to understand any value of the temple, okay? But also C, hey, did those cultic prophets really end? Or were there people in the time of Jesus who were associated with the temple, who were still holding on to these old traditions? And is that why Simeon and Anna recognize him? And is that why he goes to the temple and finds himself among his father's people?
That's Margaret's
and they're
contention.
being amazed by him.
Would you say that, Dave? That one of Margaret's contention is that the things Jesus is doing is still resonating among certain groups of Jews.
Somebody remembers the first temple religion, and that's who gets excited about Jesus. And that's why
That's why they're amazed. Because wait, when they're talking, were the people like that he was sitting with? Were they amazed? Or no, they were both hearing
it's
them
ambiguous, I
and
think.
asking them questions. Okay, sorry. 46. And it came to pass that after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst, so in the middle of doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. And so he's sitting among his father's people, and they seem to be astonished with him. And so there may be a group of people who recognized him for what he was.
Cultic prophets, priests who had these old traditions, who
And
were
they're in a
focused on the
circle
way
around him.
Yes, that's true, interesting, and who were focused on the way, the truth, and the life. Right, this is their doctrine: the way, the truth, and the life. Although light and life are usually the same thing.
So usually the word for astonished or amazed is like a thaumazo kind of word, but this is existemi. So ek is like out of, and histemi is like your place, your establishment. So probably another way to say it is
they were beside themselves.
Yeah, they were beside themselves. They were taken out. They were like
out of my body.
They were
Astonishment.
moved out of their place. So existemi is kind of, yeah, I mean, it could be translated as astonished, or I like probably beside themselves better. And so I think there's some ambiguity still there, but that's what the Greek bit is.
But that is a very interesting thing. They're at the temple. He is in the center. He's in the middle of these priests, and they're astonished.
I really like that as a provocative way to read it, because clearly the word business is not found in there. Just it's not.
Right. Nor is house, right? It's the something, and you have to guess what.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's the natural reading is among the literary meaning that makes sense, that correlates with verse 44.
Yeah.
We looked among my father's people. You misunderstood who my father was. That's the implied message here. Not that my father's business is to teach these rabbis. You misunderstood.
But you're adding
who my
another
father
layer
was.
that there were possibly priests of the ancient tradition
And
there
that's
at
my
the
point.
temple. And that's
Who's he
he's
talking to?
He's not saying this, but at the very end, he like lets the cat out, the little kitty gets out of the bag at the very last page. Should we just read it?
Yeah,
Let's
we
do
can
it.
find that. It is.
Well, I got a highlighter right here, so I'll read it.
Me too.
So
Look, dude, you
Look at
guys
that.
are like two
Dude,
peas in a
hold it
pod.
up. We got the same thing
Aw.
highlighted.
Yeah.
Wait, does it start on exact? It's exactly the same.
Dude, that
thing.
is so weird.
Exactly the
That
same
is
paragraph.
such a trip, dude. Whoa.
So you should highlight it too. So go to page 2. No.
You need to find a bromance like that. That's the type of bromance you want.
Oh my gosh. He says, Israel's psalmody, far from being influenced by the thought of the canonical prophets, the Deuteronomistic school, and even the authors of the so-called wisdom literature of the Old Testament, should be seen as revealing a series of notions and propositions which are linked together in such a way as to warrant their being regarded in terms of a creed, which not only govern the thinking of the aforementioned religious teachers of ancient Israel, but also suggest that, as one might have expected, the Hebrew scriptures have had a direct bearing upon the birth of Christianity to a far greater degree than is commonly recognized in the contemporary field of New Testament scholarship. Translation: there's stuff about Jesus in the Old Testament. We just aren't looking for it in the right way. We've got to look for it with eyes that can see. I think that's probably a way I would kind of translate what he just said.
Yeah, or to restate that with slightly different words, I think. There is kind of a view in some kind of scholarly circles, but like also a popular view. I had this conversation with my brother-in-law a few months ago, and I had to disabuse him of this idea that basically there's the Old Testament religion, and rabbis are correctly doing that. They're correct. They're descended from that, and then Christianity is like a weird outgrowth, and that's not it. Okay, there was the first temple, and whatever happened there, and that's the fragmented thing that we've lost a lot of details on. And there are many descendants of the first temple, and one of them for sure is rabbinical Judaism. And there are other kinds of Judaism, like the various kinds of mystical Judaism, or like the Dead Sea Scrolls people who are other, or Enochic Judaism, who are other descendants of it. The Gnostics were descendants of it. The Mandeans, that there's still like a half a dozen of them left or something. They're like the Cutlerites of the Near East.
Cutlerites of the Near East. That's nowhere been said on YouTube ever. I just want to make that comment.
That's the most niche comparison.
The Cutlerites of the Near East.
For SEO purposes, one specific Google search will always find this.
We got to put that as a hashtag just for fun.
Cutlerites of the Near East. But Christianity is another. Christianity is an heir to First Temple Judaism, First Temple religion, right? And he's pointing it out. He's saying, look, the Psalms are all about entering the presence of God, being led there by cultic prophets who are singing angels, getting shalom that way. It's holding on to your covenants. That's truth as you follow the way into the presence of life. The righteous will live by faith. And all of that is sort of key stuff out of which that's the stuff that the Christians held on to. And after the debates between Paul and James, right, we're not so much worried about the sacrifices and the, some of the sort of performances and some of the rabbinical, the 613 commandments.
Which, by the way, they're not really reflected in the Book of Mormon either as much in great detail.
Sure.
Which is interesting.
So one way you could say it as well is that in the beginning, there was a truth and a religion revealed to mankind that eventually fell into apostasy. And then Christ comes to remind everybody of that original, and then he is killed, and then that falls into apostasy. And that once again in these latter days, there is a restoration happening to remind us of that original religion.
I think that's right. I would make a slight nuance, though. I would say we should remember at all times that Christ didn't come to invent a religion. He did come to remind people of something that was before, but he came principally to perform the great and final sacrifice.
Yes.
That's what Christ came to do. It wasn't novel moral teachings. People weren't astonished because they'd never heard anything like it before. They were astonished because they were reminded of the things that have been lost, and because he showed up teaching as one who has authority, as a high priest, as a Davidic king, not as a scholar arguing his point of view, right? Jesus was the atoning sacrifice, and yeah, that's the nuance I would add.
Boom.
I love it.
Let's just end with that, and until next time, stay curious and hungry.